Welcome to the Undead Sages podcast, where we travel back in time to talk to long-dead wise men and women. Of special interest is the question how sensitive people like you and me can live rich and meaningful lives in our uncertain times. My name is Merijn de Haen, and today we'll once again be talking to the Buddha. We first encountered Siddhartha Gautama some 6 weeks ago, and we've been quizzing him about the development of his practical philosophy to end suffering. Today, we've finally arrived in the present day, and we'll discuss the reception of Buddhist ideas and practices in the West. Next week, we'll have one final episode with the Buddha, where the emphasis will lie on several historical examples of Buddhism going horribly wrong in practice. But today, as I've said, we'll examine how Buddhism has changed in contact with the West. Please welcome back to the podcast, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha.
Hello, Merijn.
So we've talked about the Theravada and Mahayana schools of Buddhism and how they brought your original teachings into the present day. A relatively recent development is the adoption of Buddhism in the West. How did Buddhism first arrive there?
Before I answer your question, I hope you'll allow me a point of procedure. While it's strange to me to be speaking about Buddhism in this way, I will use that term to describe the full cultural phenomenon. That includes the different philosophical strands, the variety in practices, and all of the dogmas that come along with them. So when I use the term Buddhism in our conversation today, it will not be to refer to my original teachings, which were relatively limited in scope, especially when compared to the bewildering gamut of thought and practice that exists today. So, to answer your question about Buddhism's arrival in the West, it began with translations of texts in the 19th century, during colonial encounters with Asia. Scholars like Max Muller made Buddhist ideas known to Western audiences. Later, travelers and missionaries brought back stories of Asian traditions.
When did people in the West really start practicing Buddhism?
Around the mid-20th century, Japanese Zen teachers like D.T. Suzuki popularized Zen, while Tibetan masters like the Dalai Lama and Chogyam Trungpa introduced Tibetan Buddhism. Vipassana, rooted in Theravada, also gained followers, especially through teachers like S.N. Goenka.
Why did Westerners find Buddhism appealing?
Many sought an alternative to organized religion. Buddhism offered a practical, introspective path without dogma, focused on meditation, mindfulness, and self-transformation. It resonated with those disillusioned by materialism and societal stress.
Did it change as it moved west?
Yes. It adapted to new cultures, becoming less ritualistic in some cases and more psychological or scientific in tone. Mindfulness, for example, is often taught as a secular practice, separate from Buddhist faith.
Is Buddhism in the West similar to Buddhism in Asia?
In some ways, yes. The core teachings, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and meditation remain the same. But the way it is practiced often differs.
How does it differ?
In Asia, Buddhism is deeply woven into culture, rituals, and daily life. Temples are community centers, and practices often include devotion, chanting, and ceremonies. In the West, Buddhism is often seen as more individual and focused on meditation or mindfulness.
Is Western Buddhism less religious?
Often, yes. Many Westerners approach it as a philosophy or a science of the mind rather than a religion. They focus on meditation and ethics, while rituals and faith in the supernatural are less emphasized.
Are there differences in how monastics are seen?
Yes. In Asia, monks and nuns are central to Buddhist communities, supported by lay people through offerings. In the West, monastic traditions are less prominent. Most practitioners are lay people, and some adapt teachings for everyday life rather than monastic discipline.
Do people in Asia and the West approach teachings differently?
In Asia, teachings are often passed down through lineage and tradition. In the West, people are more likely to question and analyze teachings, drawing on reason and personal experience. This can lead to innovation but also to misinterpretation.
Are there similarities between the two?
Certainly. Both seek to reduce suffering and cultivate wisdom, compassion, and mindfulness. Both revere the teachings even if the way they engage with them varies.
Are there specific Western movements or communities?
Many. Zen thrived on the US West Coast. Tibetan Buddhism inspired centers like the Kagyu and Nyingma lineages, and Vipassana grew through retreats. Groups like the Triratna community and secular Buddhist movements also emerged.
Has science played a role in its adoption?
Very much so. Neuroscience studies on meditation and mindfulness validated their benefits. This drew interest from psychologists, doctors, and wellness practitioners, further spreading Buddhist practices in non-religious settings.
Are there challenges in how Buddhism is practiced in the West?
Sometimes it is simplified or detached from its ethical and spiritual roots. Focusing only on mindfulness or meditation risks losing the full depth of the teachings. Yet, it also shows Buddhism's adaptability.
Do you think Buddhism has a future in the West?
Yes, its emphasis on compassion, mindfulness, and interconnectedness speaks to universal human concerns. If practiced sincerely, its wisdom will continue to benefit many.
So let's talk about some Western movements that were inspired by teachers from the East. I'd like to ask you about 4 distinct figures and the movements they spread to the West. Thich Nhat Hanh, Sogyal Rinpoche, Chogyam Trungpa, and S.N. Goenka. Who is Thich Nhat Hanh?
Thich Nhat Hanh is a Vietnamese Zen master, poet, peace activist, and one of the most influential Buddhist teachers of the 20th and 21st centuries. He shares the Dhamma in ways that are simple, profound, and accessible to all.
What are his teachings about?
He emphasizes mindfulness in daily life, compassionate living, and the importance of interbeing, the interconnectedness of all things. His teachings focus on being fully present in the here and now, with attention to small, everyday actions like breathing, eating, or walking.
What communities formed around his teachings?
The most well-known is Plum Village, a mindfulness practice center in France that Thich Nhat Hanh founded in 1982. It has grown into an international community with practice centers around the world like Deer Park Monastery in California and Blue Cliff Monastery in New York. These centers welcome lay people and monastics alike.
What is special about Plum Village?
It is a place of mindful living. People come to practice walking meditation, mindful eating, and deep listening. The focus is on cultivating peace, joy, and understanding in community. Plum Village teaches people how to bring mindfulness into every aspect of life.
Who joins these communities?
People from all walks of life, young and old, beginners and seasoned practitioners. Some stay as monastics, while others remain lay practitioners. Many are drawn by the practical and non-dogmatic approach to mindfulness.
What is engaged Buddhism, and how is it connected?
Engaged Buddhism is Thich Nhat Hanh's vision of applying Buddhist principles to real-world issues like war, poverty, and the environment. He believes mindfulness is not just for the meditation cushion, but for transforming society. His communities often work for peace, social justice, and sustainability.
How do these communities support people?
They provide a refuge where people can slow down, heal, and reconnect with themselves. Through retreats, teachings, and group practice, they help people handle suffering and cultivate peace in their own lives and the world.
Are these communities still active today?
Yes, very much so. Even after Thich Nhat Hanh's passing, his teachings and practices continue to inspire. His monastics and lay students carry forward the work, spreading mindfulness and compassion across the globe.
What is the legacy of these communities?
They remind us that mindfulness is a way of life, not just a practice. Through Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings, these communities have shown that peace begins with each of us, in every step, every breath, and every interaction. This is their enduring gift to the world.
It sounds like a beautiful community to be a part of. Let's discuss the next teacher who set up shop in the West. Who is Sogyal Rinpoche?
Sogyal Rinpoche is a Tibetan Lama, best known as the author of the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. His teachings focus on Tibetan Buddhism, particularly Dzogchen, and he played a major role in bringing these traditions to the West.
What community did he found?
Sogyal Rinpoche founded Rigpa, an international network of Buddhist centers and practitioners. Rigpa offers teachings, retreats, and meditation practices based on the Nyingma school of Tibetan Buddhism.
What is Rigpa's main focus?
Rigpa focuses on integrating Buddhist wisdom into modern life. A central theme is understanding impermanence and preparing for death with clarity and compassion. Sogyal Rinpoche often emphasized the practices of meditation, mindfulness, and loving kindness to help people navigate life's challenges.
Who joined Rigpa?
Many Westerners seeking spiritual guidance joined Rigpa. People were drawn to Tibetan Buddhism's rich traditions, its focus on death and rebirth, and Sogyal Rinpoche's ability to explain these teachings in ways that felt accessible and relevant.
Did Rigpa face challenges?
Yes. Rigpa became the subject of controversy after allegations of misconduct were made against Sogyal Rinpoche. This caused significant turmoil in the community, leading to his stepping down as leader in 2017. The controversy raised difficult but important questions about the teacher-student relationship and accountability in spiritual communities.
How did Rigpa respond to the controversy?
Rigpa initiated reforms to address the issues raised, including establishing codes of conduct, creating systems for reporting misconduct, and focusing on ethical guidelines. These efforts aim to rebuild trust and refocus on the teachings.
Are Rigpa and its teachings still active?
Yes, Rigpa continues to operate, offering retreats, teachings, and support for practitioners. The community is now focused on upholding the core principles of Tibetan Buddhism while maintaining ethical standards and transparency.
What is Rigpa's legacy?
Rigpa's legacy is mixed. On one hand, it helped introduce many to Tibetan Buddhist practices and teachings. On the other, it serves as a reminder of the importance of ethical leadership and the need to ensure spiritual communities prioritize the well-being of their members. For those who practice sincerely, the teachings themselves remain a source of wisdom and transformation.
How should people view such communities in light of controversies?
With discernment and compassion. The teachings themselves are timeless and valuable, but human flaws can arise even in spiritual contexts. It is important to evaluate both the message and the integrity of those delivering it. True practice is always rooted in ethics, mindfulness, and the well-being of all beings.
It sounds like sometimes cultural differences can be a burden to real understanding, particularly when the Western culture of independence collides with a more traditional emphasis on lineage and teacher worship. Who is Chogyam Trungpa?
Chogyam Trungpa is a Tibetan Buddhist teacher and one of the key figures in bringing Buddhism to the West. He is known for his unconventional teaching style, blending traditional Tibetan Buddhism with modern Western culture, and for founding the Shambhala community.
What is the Shambhala community?
Shambhala is both a global community of practitioners and a spiritual path inspired by Trungpa's teachings. It draws on Tibetan Buddhist traditions, but also incorporates the idea of creating an enlightened society, a community based on mindfulness, compassion, and the recognition of innate human goodness.
What does Shambhala mean?
In Tibetan Buddhist mythology, Shambhala is a mythical kingdom of peace and wisdom. Trungpa used the name to represent his vision of a society where mindfulness and compassion shape everyday life.
What made Shambhala Buddhism unique?
Trungpa emphasized making Buddhist wisdom accessible to modern secular audiences. He developed Shambhala training, a series of teachings that focus on meditation, mindfulness, and living with courage and kindness in the world. Shambhala Buddhism integrates traditional Buddhist practices with this broader societal vision.
Who joined the Shambhala community?
Many Westerners, including artists, intellectuals, and spiritual seekers, were drawn to Trungpa's teachings in the 1970s and 1980s. His approach, which often included humor and practicality, resonated with those looking for spirituality without dogma.
Did the Shambhala community face controversies?
Yes. Chogyam Trungpa himself was controversial for his unconventional behavior, including his use of alcohol and relationships with students. After his death, The community faced further challenges when allegations of misconduct were made against his successor, Sakyong Mipham Rinpoche, in 2018. These issues caused divisions and a loss of trust within the community.
How did the community respond?
Shambhala leadership initiated reforms, including independent investigations and greater focus on ethical guidelines. Some members left, while others remained to work toward rebuilding the community in line with its core values of mindfulness and compassion.
Is the Shambhala community still active?
Yes, though it has been deeply affected by the controversies. Some centers continue to operate, focusing on meditation, mindfulness, and creating an enlightened society. Other practitioners have moved away from centralized leadership but still practice Shambhala teachings independently.
What is Shambhala's legacy?
Shambhala's teachings on human dignity, courage, and the possibility of an enlightened society have inspired many. However, its controversies highlight the importance of ethical leadership and accountability in spiritual communities. The true legacy of Shambhala lies in the practice of mindfulness and compassion, which remains relevant for anyone seeking wisdom in daily life.
So, should I view Shambhala as a failure or a success?
Neither, or perhaps both, it depends on how you approach it. Shambhala brought profound teachings to the West, helping many. But it also shows how human flaws can create challenges even in spiritual movements. The teachings remain valuable if practiced with sincerity and care. Focus on the wisdom they offer, while learning from the mistakes made. That is where true growth lies.
Okay, so these were some movements that were started by monastics from the East. S.N. Goenka was not a monastic. Can you tell me a little more about him?
S.N. Goenka is a Burmese Indian teacher who played a major role in spreading Vipassana meditation to the world. He taught a technique rooted in Theravada Buddhism but presented it in a secular, universal way, making it accessible to people of all backgrounds.
What is Dhamma.org?
Dhamma.org is the global organization Goenka founded to offer Vipassana meditation courses. It operates meditation centers around the world where people can learn and practice the technique in 10-day silent retreats.
What is Vipassana meditation?
Vipassana, which means seeing things as they really are, is a meditation practice focused on observing reality as it is. It involves observing sensations in the body with equanimity, uncovering the impermanence of all things, and freeing the mind from cravings and aversions. It is important, however, to understand that the term Vipassana has a broader meaning within the Theravada world. Other teachers, like fellow Burmese teacher Mahasi Sayadaw and several Thai teachers, also use the term to describe their distinct method of teaching insight meditation. The main thing that sets them apart is the emphasis that is placed on mindfulness as the key ingredient that leads to awakening.
Who attends these courses, facilitated by Dhamma.org?
People from all walks of life, students, professionals, retirees, people from different religions or no religion at all. Goenka emphasized that Vipassana is universal and not tied to any dogma, so anyone interested in self-transformation can attend.
What happens during a 10-day retreat?
Participants live in silence, following a strict schedule of meditation from early morning to night. They abstain from talking, reading, writing, and other distractions. The focus is on learning the Vipassana technique step by step, under the guidance of Goenka's recorded instructions and assistant teachers.
Why are these courses so popular?
They offer a direct, experiential way to understand the mind and reduce suffering. Many people find the retreat format transformative, as it gives them a chance to step away from daily life and focus deeply on inner work.
Are there any controversies around Dhamma.org?
Dhamma.org is generally respected, but some have criticized the strict format of the retreats or found the intensity challenging. Others have questioned the uniformity of Goenka's teaching style, as it doesn't adapt much to individual needs. However, these seem like minor issues compared to its overall positive impact.
How has Dhamma.org grown?
It started in India but quickly spread worldwide. There are now over 200 meditation centers and non-center locations across Asia, Europe, the Americas, Africa, and Australia. Millions of people have attended retreats since its founding.
Is it still active after Goenka's death?
Very much so. Goenka's teachings were carefully recorded, and the centers continue to follow his guidance. His senior students and the organizational structure ensure the tradition remains consistent and accessible.
What is the legacy?
It has brought the practice of Vipassana to the modern world, helping countless people reduce stress, develop mindfulness, and live more ethical, compassionate lives. Its simple, non sectarian approach has made it one of the most widespread meditation movements globally.
What makes it different from other Buddhist organizations?
Dhamma.org focuses solely on the practice of Vipassana. There is no chanting, devotional rituals, or discussion of metaphysical beliefs. It appeals to those seeking a purely practical method for self transformation.
So, are there any homegrown Western movements inspired by Buddhism?
Yes, there are several movements that originated in the West, drawing deeply from dharmic principles but evolving in their own unique ways.
Can you give an example?
One example is secular Buddhism. It's a modern approach that removes traditional rituals and metaphysical elements, focusing on meditation, mindfulness, and ethical living. Thinkers like Stephen Batchelor have been key in shaping this movement.
What makes secular Buddhism unique?
It focuses on practical teachings for reducing suffering without requiring belief in rebirth, karma, or supernatural concepts. Many people find this approach appealing because it aligns well with scientific and philosophical inquiry.
Is there another example?
Yes, insight meditation is a good one. While it has roots in Theravada Buddhism, it grew into a distinct Western movement. Teachers like Jack Cornfield, Sharon Salzberg, and Joseph Goldstein popularized it in the US, focusing on mindfulness and Vipassana meditation.
What's special about insight meditation?
It adapts traditional practices to fit Western culture, often using plain language and emphasizing psychological insights. Retreats are common, and ethical teachings play a strong role in its practice.
What is the mindfulness movement?
The mindfulness movement is a modern global phenomenon centered on the practice of mindfulness, paying non-judgmental attention to the present moment. It began as a therapeutic tool for mental health and stress relief, but also offers a way for people to seek spiritual depth in daily life.
Where did it come from?
It's deeply rooted in Buddhist teachings, especially the concept of sati, mindfulness, from the Eightfold Path. However, it was popularized in the West in a secular form by figures like John Kabat-Zinn, who developed mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, in the 1970s.
What is mindfulness as a therapeutic tool?
In therapy, mindfulness is used to help people manage stress, anxiety, depression, and chronic pain. It encourages people to observe their thoughts, feelings, and sensations without judgment, breaking cycles of reactivity and cultivating calm.
How does MBSR work?
MBSR is an 8-week program where participants learn techniques like mindful breathing, body scanning, and walking meditation. It's designed to integrate mindfulness into everyday life, helping people respond to challenges with greater clarity and balance.
Why has it become so popular?
Scientific research has shown mindfulness improves mental and physical health. It appeals to modern people because it's secular, accessible, and doesn't require adopting a religious framework. It's practical and fits into busy lives.
How is mindfulness used beyond therapy?
Many people practice mindfulness to bring greater awareness, gratitude, and meaning into daily life. Whether it's mindful eating, working, or parenting, the practice helps them live more intentionally and connect deeply with the present moment.
Can mindfulness also be spiritual?
Absolutely. For many, mindfulness becomes a doorway to spiritual growth. By fully inhabiting the present, they experience moments of insight, interconnectedness, and peace. This aligns with the deeper aims of Buddhist mindfulness to develop wisdom, compassion, and liberation from suffering.
Is the mindfulness movement different from traditional Buddhism?
It's simplified and often stripped of its religious and ethical dimensions. Traditional Buddhism includes mindfulness as part of a broader path, alongside morality, wisdom, and meditation. The modern mindfulness movement focuses mainly on the present moment awareness aspect.
Is that a problem?
Not necessarily. For those seeking stress relief or emotional balance, secular mindfulness is effective. But without ethical grounding or deeper reflection, its potential for profound spiritual transformation may be limited.
Are there criticisms of the mindfulness movement?
Yes. Some criticize its commercialization. Mindfulness apps, courses, and retreats often focus on profit. Others argue it's being used to maintain productivity in stressful environments rather than addressing systemic issues. This is sometimes called mech mindfulness. Another criticism applies to lifting mindfulness out of the broader path that traditionally includes morality. For instance, mindfulness can make a soldier better at killing people or a grifter better at manipulating the vulnerable. Is that a good thing?
So, how can mindfulness avoid being shallow?
By grounding it in ethics and compassion. Even in a secular context, mindfulness can foster kindness, patience, and awareness of others. When combined with deeper reflection, it becomes a tool for personal and societal transformation.
What's the legacy of the mindfulness movement so far?
It has introduced millions to the benefits of mindfulness, improving mental health and daily well being. For some, it has been a stepping stone to deeper spiritual exploration. Its success shows how the Dharma can continue to adapt to modern needs.
Are there other Western movements that were inspired by your message?
Yes, the Zen inspired arts movements are worth mentioning. Teachers like Shunryu Suzuki helped spread Zen in the West, but their students often blended Zen with Western art, poetry, and daily life. This gave rise to movements like San Francisco Zen Center and engaged Zen practices in creative work.
How do dharmic movements connect with progressive causes like social justice or ecology?
Many contemporary dharmic movements are deeply engaged with progressive causes. This reflects the principle of compassion in action, using wisdom and mindfulness to address suffering not just on a personal level, but within society and the natural world.
Can you give an example?
Engaged Buddhism is a clear example. Figures like Thich Nhat Hanh apply Buddhist principles to issues like racial justice, poverty, war, and climate change. They see mindfulness, compassion, and non-violence as tools to transform systemic injustice.
How does mindfulness help with social justice?
Mindfulness cultivates awareness, not just of personal suffering, but of the interconnectedness of all beings. When you see this clearly, it's hard to ignore the structural causes of suffering, like racism, inequality, or environmental degradation. Mindfulness also helps activists avoid burnout by staying present and balanced. Groups like Radical Dharma focus on dismantling racism through dharmic practice. They call for personal and collective liberation, blending meditation with direct conversations about privilege, oppression, and healing.
What about reparations?
Reparations align with the Buddhist teaching of karma. Recognizing and addressing the harm caused by past actions, whether slavery, colonialism, or other injustices, reflects the ethical principle of taking responsibility for suffering caused. Some Buddhist communities now actively support reparative justice.
How do dharmic movements engage with ecological issues?
Ecology is deeply connected to Buddhist principles of interdependence and compassion. Movements like Green Buddhism advocate for mindfulness in how we treat the earth. Joanna Macy's work that reconnects combines Buddhist wisdom with ecological activism, helping people confront climate grief and find hope through mindful action. Interdependence teaches that all life is interconnected. What affects one affects all. Recognizing this, Buddhists see the destruction of the environment not as an isolated issue, but as harm to ourselves and all beings. Caring for the earth becomes an ethical and spiritual responsibility.
Are traditional Buddhist concepts changing in this context?
They're being expanded. For example, the precept of non-harming now includes not just avoiding harm to humans or animals, but also to ecosystems. Similarly, mindfulness is applied to consumption, reducing waste, supporting sustainable practices, and living simply. When humans gain more power to affect the world around us, we should also take seriously the expanded responsibility that comes with it.
What challenges do dharmic movements face in engaging with these causes?
One challenge is avoiding spiritual bypassing, using meditation or mindfulness to avoid confronting uncomfortable truths about privilege, oppression, or injustice. Another is balancing activism with traditional practices, ensuring that outward action is grounded in inner clarity.
Are there criticisms of these movements?
Some feel they risk politicizing the Dhamma, turning it into a tool for activism rather than focusing on personal liberation. Others argue the opposite, that staying apolitical ignores the traditional call to reduce suffering wherever it arises. Both sides raise valid concerns.
So, are dharmic movements compatible with progressive causes?
Yes, when they stay true to the core principles of wisdom and compassion. I teach the alleviation of suffering. To what extent? I would say to the extent the practitioner feels this applies, whether it's personal, societal, or environmental. Progressive causes can be an extension of this mission, as long as they remain rooted in mindfulness, non-violence, and ethical action.
What's the potential for these movements?
Enormous. By addressing systemic suffering with the tools of mindfulness, interdependence, and compassion, dharmic movements can inspire profound change. They remind us that transformation begins within but must ripple outward to the world.
What is the pragmatic dharma movement?
Pragmatic Dharma is a contemporary movement focused on making meditation and awakening highly practical, measurable, and accessible. It emphasizes a results oriented approach to Buddhist practices, particularly mindfulness and insight meditation.
Where did it come from?
It grew from Western practitioners exploring advanced meditation techniques, often inspired by Theravada Buddhism but adapted to modern contexts. Key figures include Daniel Ingram, Kenneth Folk, and others who wrote and taught about achieving tangible progress in meditation, including states of insight and awakening.
What makes it different from traditional Buddhism?
Pragmatic Dharma shifts away from ritual, faith, or lineage based practice. Instead, it focuses on clear instructions, personal experimentation, and sharing experiences. Practitioners openly discuss meditation progress, including advanced stages that are often treated as private or sacred in traditional contexts.
What's their view on awakening?
Pragmatic Dharma demystifies awakening, treating it as an achievable, natural process. Leaders like Daniel Ingram write openly about stream entry and higher stages of enlightenment, encouraging practitioners to set awakening as a real practical goal.
What methods do they use?
They emphasize intensive meditation techniques such as vipassana, mindfulness, and concentration practices. These methods often come from Theravada traditions but are presented in straightforward, no-nonsense ways. They also use maps of meditation progress, like the stages of insight from the Visuddhimagga, to guide practitioners.
What's the role of technology or community in this movement?
Technology plays a big role. Forums like the Dharma Overground and social media allow practitioners to share experiences, ask questions, and track progress. This openness fosters a sense of community and experimentation where people can learn from each other.
Are there any controversies around pragmatic dharma?
Yes. Some critics say it oversimplifies Buddhism, focusing too much on meditation techniques and measurable results while neglecting ethical conduct or the broader spiritual path. Others feel that openly discussing advanced stages of practice could lead to ego or misinterpretation.
Is it only for advanced meditators?
Not at all. While it appeals to those seeking deep insight or awakening, pragmatic Dharma also welcomes beginners. The emphasis is on practical methods that anyone can try, with clear guidance and feedback from others.
What's the core philosophy behind it?
The idea is that awakening is not reserved for monks or mystics. It's achievable by ordinary people who commit to the practice and follow clear instructions. Pragmatic Dharma encourages experimentation, skepticism, and open dialogue about what works.
How does it fit into the broader Buddhist tradition?
Pragmatic Dharma is a modern evolution, deeply influenced by traditional teachings, but shaped by Western values like openness, practicality, and individuality. It's part of the broader trend of Buddhism adapting to modern contexts.
What's its legacy so far?
Pragmatic Dharma has made meditation more approachable and actionable for many people. By demystifying awakening and fostering open discussion, it has empowered practitioners to take their spiritual path into their own hands. It's a testament to how the Dhamma can evolve to meet the needs of the present.
Are these movements authentic Buddhism?
They are inspired by the Dharma, but they adapt it to new cultural contexts. Authenticity depends on how sincerely the teachings are practiced. The essence of Buddhism Ending suffering and cultivating wisdom and compassion can take many forms.
Do these movements have the same depth as traditional Buddhism?
Depth comes from practice, not tradition alone. If these movements encourage mindfulness, insight, and ethical living, they have the potential for profound transformation. However, without the foundation of discipline and study, some depth may be lost. It depends on the practitioner.
Will these Western-inspired movements last?
Time will tell. Movements that stay rooted in the core principles of mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom are likely to endure. The Dhamma is adaptable. It has survived and thrived in many cultures, and it can do so in the West as well.
To end this exploration into the adoption of Buddhism in the West, let me ask you about three Western philosophers who had insights that align closely with your own. Would you count the philosophy of Hume, Kant, and Schopenhauer as adaptations of Buddhist philosophy in the West?
Not exactly adaptations, but their ideas share striking parallels. These thinkers developed their insights independently, but they resonate with certain teachings, particularly on impermanence, the nature of the self, and the limits of human knowledge.
How does David Hume relate to Buddhist ideas?
Hume's philosophy questions the idea of a fixed, permanent self. He argues that what we call the self is merely a bundle of perceptions, thoughts, emotions, and sensations arising and passing. This aligns closely with my teaching of not self, which states that the self is not a fixed entity but a collection of impermanent processes.
What about Immanuel Kant?
Kant's work explores the limits of human understanding. He argues that we cannot know the world as it is in itself. We can only know the world as it appears to us, filtered through our senses and mind. This is similar to the Dharmic insight that reality is conditioned by perception and mental constructs. Kant's emphasis on ethical principles also has echoes of Buddhist morality, though their foundations differ.
And Schopenhauer?
Schopenhauer is the closest to Buddhism. He directly engages with Eastern thought, drawing inspiration from translations of Buddhist texts. His concept of the will as a blind driving force behind existence parallels the Buddhist understanding of tanha, craving, the cause of suffering. Like Buddhism, he sees liberation as possible through renunciation of the will, leading to detachment and peace.
Were they influenced by Buddhism directly?
Schopenhauer was likely influenced, as he had access to early translations of Buddhist and Hindu texts. Hume and Kant, however, lived before significant Buddhist teachings reached Europe. Their ideas arose independently, but show how universal truths, like the impermanence of self and the constructed nature of reality, can be discovered through deep contemplation.
Can their philosophies be considered Buddhist in nature?
Not entirely. While their ideas overlap with Buddhist teachings, their frameworks differ. Hume is skeptical and empirical, Kant is grounded in reason and ethics, and Schopenhauer is more metaphysical and pessimistic. Buddhism, by contrast, is a practical path aimed at liberation through ethical living, meditation, and insight.
So, are they part of the Western adaptation of Buddhism?
They are more precursors than adaptations. Their philosophies reflect similar truths, but do not incorporate the spiritual or experiential dimensions of Buddhism. They laid the groundwork for later Western thinkers to engage with Buddhist ideas more explicitly.
Did their work pave the way for Buddhism in the West?
In a way, yes. Their questioning of the self, exploration of impermanence, and ethical focus helped prepare Western intellectuals to engage with Buddhist philosophy. By the time Buddhist teachings arrived in the West, thinkers influenced by Hume, Kant, and Schopenhauer were already receptive to these ideas.
What's the key difference between their philosophies and Buddhism?
The key difference is that Buddhism is a path to liberation. It's not just philosophy, but a practice that transforms the mind and heart. While Hume, Kant, and Schopenhauer engage with profound truths, their work remains primarily intellectual. Buddhism, by contrast, invites you to live these truths and experience freedom from suffering directly.
Well, Buddha, this has been an eye-opening discussion where I've learned many new things. Thank you very much for talking to me once again.
The pleasure has been mine completely, Merijn. It's so heartening to approach my death knowing that my teachings will not just live on after my death, but see active extension and elaboration for millennia to come. It's truly remarkable, and I look forward to our next discussion.
So do I, Buddha. Until next week. And thank you for listening. Tune in next week for the last installment of our conversation with Siddhartha Gautama, where we explore where Buddhism fell short of its lofty aspirations and ended up causing suffering instead of eliminating it. In the meantime, if you've enjoyed this episode of the Undead Sages podcast, please like, share, and subscribe.